Hey y'all, welcome back to Exile Wargaming, where today, and as always, we're going to be talking about winning with Harlequins in competitive 10th edition Warhammer 40k with a battle report against the Black Templars in the Righteous Crusaders detachment. Now, I've gotten a lot of requests over the past few months to play a more traditional style Harlequin army without the Falcons and the D-Cannons or your Vrain and the Vizarch. So we're going to do just that today. The only unit that we are bringing into this army that is not, say, Harlequins on the data sheet will be 2 Wave Serpents, but the list goes as follows. We have a Solitaire, a Death Jester with Fate's Messenger, 2 Troop Masters that'll be attached to 2 11-man troop units with all the good stuff, a solo Troop Master to complete some actions or just hold the home field objective. We have 4 units of 5 troops, 4 Star Weavers, 2 Void Weavers, 2 Wave Serpents with Bright Lances and Shuriken Cannons to cart around those big 11-man units of troops, and then 2 units of Sky Weavers with Haywire and Star Bolus. Now, we are coming in at 19 total units at 1,995 points. Now we're bringing the Space Marines back on the channel. Anytime I'm trying new lists, I try to convince my buddies to bring out a more traditional style army just to see if I can put these other lists through their paces. So my opponent, when asked to do this, ended up bringing one of the scariest lists I've seen in a long time. They have a captain with Power Fist, a marshal, which is basically a captain with a power sword instead, the Emperor's Champion. Each one of these will be attached to a 5-man unit of Primaris Sword Brethren, and they'll be carted around the battlefield in one of 3 Impulsors. Now, our opponent is also bringing a lieutenant with combi weapon for some lone op, and a Justiciar with Tannhauser's Bones. Now, the Justiciar will be attached to a 20-man unit of Primaris Crusaders. They get fights first and will have a 5-up feel no pain throughout this game. So it's just a giant brick of OC2 clamoring forward for the vast majority of this game, holding on to objectives, threatening absolutely everything. It was pretty scary. I don't know if I dealt with it appropriately, but we'll see by the end. To follow this up, they have a unit of 5 infiltrators to hold the home field, 5 scouts, most likely for utility, and 3 ballistas dreadnoughts. Now, they did go down in points recently. I think they're 130 points apiece, just to provide some long-range firepower, which seems like a very good use of points in a list like this. Now, they're coming in at 13 total units at 2,000 points on the nose. Now, we rolled up a random mission and landed on R, which is Terraform, Swift Action, and Sweeping Engagement on GW Terrain Layout 3. So getting into deployment, we did not outdrop our opponent by a substantial number of units, so we really had to kind of spread our forces across the board. Now, we end up having a Wave Serpent with troops and the Troop Master, Devastating Wounds, all the good stuff over here to kind of contest this objective early on. We have a Star Weaver with some troops, and we have the Death Jester over here as well. So if the troops get out, the Death Jester could just continually pop in and out and kind of fire and fade himself every single turn, putting shots down wherever he needs to go. We have 2 Void Weavers right in the middle behind this center rune, so they can pop out and really start putting the hurt on any of these firing angles. We have another Star Weaver up here. Maybe we should have put this in reserve, but as far as the firing angles themselves, I was hoping that maybe he can bait the Ballistas Dreadnoughts out into firing into him on the first turn, and then we'd have something to shoot back the couple turns after. We have another Wave Serpent over here. We have 2 Star Weavers on this side of the board, another unit of bikes on this side of the board, and then the solo Troop Master right behind this wall, holding on to the home field objective. Now, our opponent ended up dropping this big unit of Primaris Crusaders as one of his last drops, and I assumed they would have been over here or maybe inside of this rune itself, but he ends up placing them over here, so he is really going to try to dogpile his way into the midsection and this angle of the board. I believe they do get scout as well. He has 2 units of Sword Brethren in Impulsors back here, just hiding inside or behind this rune. A unit of Infiltrators on the home field, and then a unit of Scouts up here just ready to kind of push up and do actions if they needed to. A Ballistus Dreadnought over here, and a Sword Brethren unit back here as well. So as far as the first turn goes, not knowing what our opponent's going to do, we really wanted to give ourselves the ability to shift our force wherever we needed without exposing ourselves to a bunch of the firepower that our opponents may be able to put down on us turn 1. If it seems to get a little too hairy on one side of the board, which may be over here, the game plan would most likely just be to shift everything to the other side of the board, fight for this objective, and then crash in on his force with the majority of ours after maybe we've whittled his down a substantial amount. That was the game plan going in, but we'll see exactly what it looks like afterwards. Now our opponent gets the turn 1 dice roll and ends up scouting up this unit in the center quite a few inches, and then moves these Crusaders to span the entire portion of this board. He is going to terraform in the center. Now he draws extend battle lines and no prisoners. So he is incentivized to kill something this turn, but as it looks like right now, there's not a ton that we can do to really clap back and bring all of this down in like an alpha strike afterwards. So he's in really, really good shape. Ends up pushing up this Ballistus Dreadnought over here. Both of the Ballistus end up moving out over here and get some shots onto the Star Weaver. Now, when we rolled our fate dice, we didn't get any 6s. We did get a 5, a few 4s, a 3, and I think a 2 or a 1 up here. So as one Ballistus fires, could have brought down the Star Weaver in its entirety. We end up using one of our fate dice to keep it alive and hold off the other Ballistus from being able to wipe out our troops, as well as anything shooting out of this Impulsor. But they are able to bring it down pretty handily, which is fine for us as long as we don't lose our troops. Our opponent's going to end up scoring 7 points on secondaries and terraforming the center objective, and I really don't see a way for us to keep our opponent from completing this at the end. So it's already starting to look a little bit dicey. In our turn, we end up drawing Containment and Establish Locus. So we're not going to establish Locus. There's no reason for us to do that for something like 2 points at this point in time. So we're going to discard it for a CP. We use the Solitaire over here to get Containment, and then I believe we use the Star Weaver over here to get Containment afterwards. So we push up our force, everything that we have over here, to start contesting this objective, making our opponent's life pretty hard. If we can take this side of the board, even if our opponent takes this over here, we shift our Void Weavers out, then we have a good chance of crashing in on them on a later portion of the game. So our troops that were outside of the Star Weaver that got blown up last turn end up pushing forward to get some fusion pistol shots on this Impulsor. Our other unit of troops in the Star Weaver come back out over here to start putting some fire down and just be something to follow up whatever our attack is here afterwards. The Star Weavers or the Sky Weavers end up coming out over here to put some shots into the Impulsor as well. And then the Wave Serpent crashes in just to do whatever he possibly can. If we got to shoot down the Impulsor, we can do that, or we can shoot into this Ballistus Dreadnought as well. This Star Weaver ended up pushing up over here to get the troops out and put some easy fusion pistol shots and some, neuro disruptors and whatever it is into this unit of scouts, and then they can just hop back in at the end of the turn. So really, we're just trying to out-activate our opponent over here. If everything's protected in transports, right, that means we can use our fate dice to keep these Star Weavers or the Wave Serpent alive throughout the shooting phase, and then it forces our opponent to attack our vehicles afterwards. If they can't completely wrap them, we don't lose a bunch in desperate escape, then on the following turn, we can clap back. This is how we kind of win the trade war. Even though their units are better overall, we just have so much of ours that we can really force the outcome that we want on this side of the board in just pure numbers and activations. On this side, we push both the Void Weavers out to get line of sight onto both the Impulsors or this unit of Primaris Crusaders. We are most likely going to have to try to battle shock this unit. That's my plan. If we can battle shock it, then excellent. It makes our life a whole bunch easier. The troops that got out of this Star Weaver ended up pushing up here, so we could just kind of move block this unit. The Star Weavers or Sky Weavers come up here to get shots on one of these Impulsors as well. The unit of big troop unit ends up coming out of the Wave Serpent on this side of the board. They push up. We are within fusion pistol range of this Impulsor, and then the Wave Serpent's just going to get on and keep our opponent from being able to heroically intervene or charge into our unit of Harlequin troops with their big Crusader squad. The Solitaire is going to end up just doing actions on this side of the board, and then the Death Jester is going to be able to put some shots in and then hop back into this Star Weaver afterwards. So moving on to the shooting portion of this unit of Harlequin troops has 5 fusion pistols inside of it. They are able to do a substantial number of wounds to this Impulsor, and we are able to bring it down in combination with the Bright Lance over here. So this was pretty awesome, pretty nice. The Star Weavers, or Sky Weavers, excuse me, end up dropping 12 mortal wounds on, or devastating wounds on this Impulsor down here. It does not blow up, but everything hit, everything wounded. We are able to bring them out. The Sword Brethren that were inside of this get out behind this rune. The Sword Brethren that were in this Impulsor get out over here. From here, we get to dump almost everything that we can, the Void Weavers, into this unit of Primaris Crusaders. I believe one of these Void Weavers also split fire and brought down this Impulsor too. But after 3 battle shocks, we attempted to put 3 on him, he failed the second. So these guys will not be utilizing a stratagem this turn, which is a very, very big deal for us. It allows our Harlequin troop to charge the Sword Brethren and not get heroically intervened. So again, we can just wipe off some of the scoring units across the board. On this side of the board, these Sky Weavers whiffed almost entirely. I think they only did 3 wounds on this Impulsor. And then the Bright Lance ends up firing in, and we did use a Fate Dice to put another 7 through on this, and then the Star Weaver, or I'm sorry, the Fusion Pistols right here, were able to bring it down afterwards. So this does blow up, ends up putting a mortal wound over here, puts a wound here, puts a wound here, ends up putting, yes, he did not overwatch, ends up putting 2 or 3 mortal wounds on this unit of troops afterwards, and then the scouts took 1 as well. So all of his stuff ended up taking 1, and our Harlequin troops ended up taking 2 or 3. So in our charge phase, we end up moving our Harlequin troop, the big 11-man unit with the troop masters. So this is 12 Harlequins, push into the Sword Brethren. We roll a really good number of 6s, 8 of them. We bring them down to everyone but the captain, who has only 2 wounds remaining. He is able to clap back and go Super Saiyan and brings down 3 of our Harlequin troops afterwards. I believe we may have used lightning fast reactions. Everything else as far as combat is going to stay exactly where it is. We don't have anything that we need to charge or tie up this turn. We just want to be able to take our opponent their mobility away, and if we can stall them for a couple turns, we're in really great shape. So we're going to walk out of this turn with 6 points on containment. We're going to discard Establish Locust and get another command point there. In our opponent's turn 2, they end up drawing Call the Horde and discard it, and then draw Area Denial and Overwhelming Force. So they are going to be able to walk out with a pretty good number of secondary points this turn as well. Should end up being an 8. And they are going to score 10 points in primary because they terraformed the center objective, and then they held the other 2. So they did not end up holding this because the Wave Serpent was over here. We had some Harlequin troops, and they hold their home field and the center afterwards. Now, our opponent ends up falling back with the captain. He comes back behind this rune, and then the Sword Brethren that got out of the original Impulsor over here just push up. They put some flamethrowers into our Harlequin troop. I believe this unit ends up firing into this Harlequin troop as well. We do go for, I believe, -1 to hit, but a pretty substantial number of them end up getting brought down. We don't have 5-up feel no pains, anything like that. These are just 4-up invulnerable save, toughness 3 models. There's a good number of them that get taken care of here. Some of the pistols over here end up getting shot into this Harlequin troop, but after our opponent moves, we do Phantasm to block this corridor, so he does have a much longer charge coming around with the vast majority of his units over here. So even if he is able to get into combat with one of the Void Weavers, it's not going to be that many attacks, and hopefully we can live to fight another day. The Ballistus Dreadnought moves up and fires into this Void Weaver over here, does a few wounds. I think we leave it on 2 afterwards. Now, the Sword Brethren that were down here end up pushing up. They try to put some fire into these Sky Weavers, and everything bounces. We walk away pretty good over here. The Ballistus Dreadnought ends up firing into, I believe, these Sky Weavers as well, and also cannot get a wound through. This other Ballistus moves up to get some OC on this objective, and then there is a scout or 2 back here as well. They do not have a ton in the realm of shooting, but they are starting to really make things happen. In the charge phase, our opponent ends up moving the Sword Brethren into this Wave Serpent over here and kills the remaining Harlequin troops. So we are almost wiped out on this side of the board. They leave the Wave Serpent on a single wound remaining. The Primaris Crusaders end up just tagging on to this objective and are able to bring down, they do not roll high enough, the remaining couple Harlequin troops and both of the Sky Weavers over here. So the move block did what it was supposed to, but we are losing a substantial number of units in this exchange. If we lose the Wave Serpent, we lost 12 troops, or 11, the Troop Master. We lost a unit of Sky Weavers. We lost another unit over here. It's starting to get a little bit dicey, and there's so much more that can happen. On this section of the board in the charge phase, he ends up moving the Sword Brethren into this Wave Serpent. They tag onto the Star Weaver as well and the Sky Weavers. They are very easily able to bring down this Wave Serpent. This one had no chance in hell of living. I think we use lightning fast reactions on this one over here, and our Harlequin troop have to get out in the back. The Ballistus Dreadnought over here goes into the Star Weaver. They may have tank shocked, and we'll see where it goes from there. But our opponent's walking out of this turn with 8 points in secondaries. So in our turn 2, we end up drawing Marked for Death and Engage on All Fronts. Now, Engage on All Fronts isn't really bad for us, but Marked for Death is pretty difficult. Our opponent ends up choosing this Primaris Crusader squad, the Sword Brethren, and it was either the Combi Weapon Lieutenant or the Ballistus Dreadnought down here. Now, our game plan really is to force our opponent to have to shift to a section of the board they really don't want to be in. So we are going to reposition one of our Void Weavers over here. The one with a few wounds remaining is going to stay on this side of the board, and the Star Weaver with the Death Jester are going to stay over here as well. It forces our opponent to push forward. They don't have anything on this side of the board that could bring these down in shooting, which means they're going to have to deal with it in combat. So I really would like my opponent to push this section of their board over here or back here so that we can play the rest of the game on the other objectives, at least for a couple more turns. Our opponent was on this center objective with the Combi Weapon Lieutenant, so the troops that were inside of this Star Weaver that was over here end up getting out and just putting some pressure on him afterwards. We want our opponent scoring as little as they possibly can. The Solitaire from this side of the board ends up blitzing to our opponent's home field objective down here to try to steal it from the infiltrators. The goal here, again, is to limit our opponent's ability to score any more points this turn. And then the Wave Serpent just tries to hold these guys in combat. He does fire a Bright Lance in, and we're able to bring down one of these. I don't believe the Shuriken Cannon does anything, though, afterwards. Now, on this side of the board, we get to start making something happen. This Void Weaver on the top ended up putting some shots into the Primaris Crusaders, as well as this Void Weaver, as well as the Death Jester, and we're able to bring down, I believe, 4 or 5 or maybe 6 of them, which is pretty solid for us. A bunch of Battle Shocks go on them. They do end up passing all of them this time. The Skyweavers fall back out of combat with the Sword Brethren, and the unit of Harlequin troops comes out and absolutely manhandles this unit with fusion pistols. There are 5 fusion pistols coming out of this unit. One of them's hitting on 2s, the rest are hitting on 3s with a reroll. We're wounding on 2s, and every one of them does a minimum 2 damage. At -4 AP. So we bring down the entirety of the Primaris Sword Brethren, except for the captain. Our unit of troops that got out of the Star Weaver, the Ballistus destroyed last turn, ends up putting some fusion pistols and grenades into this Ballistus Dreadnought as well. And then our Sky Weavers, in combination with this Void Weaver up here, are very easily able to handle this remaining Ballistus Dreadnought. So all our opponent will have over here at the end of this turn is maybe a Scout, and then possibly this Ballistus Dreadnought afterwards. So we are going to control this section of the board. We just have to see what happens afterwards. In our charge phase, this unit of Harlequin troops is able to bring down the captain up here. The Ballistus Dreadnought does end up surviving, and the Solitaire only brings down 4 of the infiltrators, but I believe we keep them from scoring that objective this turn. So everything went according to plan. In our opponent's turn 3, they end up drawing Established Locus and Behind Enemy Lines. They're going to walk out of this turn with 8 points in secondary. This Primaris Crusader squad ends up shooting some guns into here. I believe the Combi Weapon Lieutenant, he may be doing actions this turn. The Ballistus Dreadnought comes out and fires some shots into this Harlequin troop as well, and then pushes down to try, I believe the plan was to tank shock the Solitaire afterwards. There was a captain behind this rune that fell back the turn after, is going to move up here and just hold on to this objective. And then these guys are going to try to bring down the Star Weaver and the Death Jester. The Ballistus Dreadnought stays, fires, nothing gets through, and we're going to move on to the charge phase. In the charge phase, our opponent attempts to make the push. They charge the Star Weaver with the Sword Brethren, but they fail the first charge and have to use a command point to re-roll over here. They end up getting in the second time, and the Death Jester has to make a desperate escape and get out over here. The Ballistus Dreadnought ended up charging the Solitaire, but could not tank shock. He lost the CP in the reroll over here and hasn't been generating a bunch of command points either, as he's been scoring every single secondary for the entirety of this game. It was kind of aggravating. The Primaris Crusaders up here end up coming into the Void Weaver, and then the Combi Weapon Lieutenant finishes off the Harlequin troop right over here. The Ballistus Dreadnought on the back edge of the board ends up getting brought down by our Harlequin troops, and we are on to the next turn. In our turn 3, we end up drawing Storm Hostile Objective and Recover Assets. So we're going to leave this Harlequin troop over here. I believe there's a scout they still have to finish off on this side of the board, which is aggravating because we couldn't do Recover Assets over here anymore. And we're just running out of units to be able to do things. The unit of Harlequin troops ends up getting into this Star Weaver over here. The big unit of Harlequin troops ends up just advancing and trying to get close to the midboard. We stay out of range with the Void Weaver for our opponent to make their reactive move, and the Void Weaver is able to bring down this Combi Weapon Lieutenant afterwards. Now, the Death Jester does end up pushing up and firing into this captain on the objective. We are going to end up taking this from them the turn after, and then the Solitaire uses Feigned Retreat and falls back from being in combat with the Ballistus Dreadnought. We do end up moving our Sky Weavers over here. into this section of the board to put shots onto the Ballistus Dreadnought, and then we fire and fade them onto the objective afterwards. Now, there is still an Infiltrator left, but the goal here is to do as many wounds as we can to the Ballistus and then charge it again with the Solitaire and see if we could finish it off. In our last team, we were able to bring down the Ballistus Dreadnought over here, but our opponent ends up drawing Sabotage and Assassination. The volume of secondaries our opponent got inside of our deployment zone, I have never seen in a game before, but maybe I've never seen it because most often our opponent is not in our backfield for the entirety of the game. So it felt a little saltier than it should have been, but they are going to get 6 for Sabotage. And another 5 for Assassination when the Sword Brethren are able to bring down the Death Jester up here. Now, our opponent wasn't scoring a bunch in secondaries that turn. In fact, they only got their Terraform secondaries at 2 points. It didn't really matter because they're getting 10 plus points, it feels like, every turn in secondaries. So the Infiltrator over here ends up throwing a grenade into the Solitaire and then leaves itself with just these 2 Skyweavers afterwards. Moving on to the next turn. So we end up drawing Extend Battle Lines and Defend Strongholds. So we are going to end up getting 5 points on Extend Battle Lines and Defend Stronghold. We're going to keep ourselves out of range of an easy charge from our opponent over here. We are going to hold this center objective. We did end up scoring 14 points in primary this turn, and I believe we are going to terraform this center objective. We are going to leave our troops over here just in case they bring this Crusader squad over here. We have something to kind of countercharge and at least give us a fighting chance at wiping them out afterwards. We do still have a lot of fusion pistols. We can throw grenades. We get some devastating ones through and just kind of hope for the best. These Skyweavers are able to bring down the last Infiltrator, and our opponent is left stranded over here. So they have 2 units remaining, 1 on this objective, 1 on this objective at the end of the turn. So we end up scoring 8 points in secondaries. Then our opponent goes and gets Secure No Man's Land and Containment on the 5th turn. So he gets Secure No Man's Land for 2 with the Sword Brethren over here, and Containment on this side of the board, and then he gets Containment on this edge of the board. He's going to get 8 points in secondary while holding this objective and having the Terraform action. He's going to get 6 in primary. When we move into our final turn, all we needed to do was draw some secondaries. We draw No Prisoners, then Call the Horde. We discard Call the Horde and get Assassination. And at this point, I cannot find a way to be able to get to this Justiciar or whatever we need to end up making this happen. So there is a captain over here, but we are too far to get the assassination on this side. There are too many wounds to get through over here, and we have to end this turn at 2 points for No Prisoners for this Infiltrator down here, and that is it. So guys, at the end of the game, our opponent ends up scoring 74 to our 73 and walks out the victor. There were a lot of different moments and points in this game that I feel like I could have prioritized, but I didn't. And when you're in the middle of some of these games, oftentimes it's hard to see the bigger picture. I left some points on the board, this Establish Locus, this maybe Marked for Death, recover assets, things that I could have done much earlier in the game, or maybe just discarding one of those secondaries for a command point and getting something a little bit more useful may have been the best thing, but it's hard to see sometimes while you're playing it. I really thought that we did it the right way. We dodged the big Crusader brick for the most part, and we forced our opponent to, end the game with just a couple units. On the board, we were far ahead by the end of it, but it didn't matter because our opponent made us prioritize damage over points too early on, and at the same time just racked up all the secondary points that he possibly could. So I think this is a pretty tough matchup for us. Anything with a lot of multi-wound units, Feel No Pain, also tied to Fights First, seems like the nightmare for us. That Feel No Pain skews the math on precision as well. There were a couple times where I really thought about just using precision on the Death Jester to kind of get rid of the Judiciar, but even if I was able to roll, 2 devastating wounds and get that 4 damage in, he's a 1, 5, or 6 up away from wasting the Death Jester's entire turn and then just hosing us the turn after. So it didn't feel very good. As well, our Harlequins are really good at punching up typically when we know we can wipe a unit in its entirety, but we don't do very well without Yvraine or the Vizarch in getting hit back. The issue here is if we charge that big Fights First unit or any of the Sword Brethren or anything like that, and we don't kill them all in one swing, 1 or 2 of them punching back can do some serious hurt to our standard 75-point Harlequin troop. It's just a matter of making it a little too difficult for us to guarantee a complete wipe and safety afterwards. We really have to use our mobility. Our opponent has an overwhelming board presence. They have a ton of OC, a ton of things that can do actions, a lot of combat, and a lot of presence. Our goal here, though, again, was to force our opponent to hold their objectives and action with their damage dealing units, and unfortunately, it just took a little too long to make that happen. We do have a decent ability to trade up into a lot of their units, like our Harlequin troop into the Sword Brethren is really, really great. It's just not that great into the big brick of Crusaders with Fights First. We have to do our damage through all phases of the game. It's not just great at shooting. It's not just great at melee. It's actually kind of just okay at both, but when you put it all together, they end up doing a nice amount overall. I think in a matchup like this, we must be willing to abandon entire sections of the board and just move block. Sacrifice your units. I think we had the right game plan. It was just some implementation down the line. So this game is one of the first that I have taken an L in a very long time. I don't want to say I'm salty in any way, shape, or form. This was a very, very good game on our opponent's part, and it really made me think twice about some tactics that maybe I became a little too accustomed to. I got a little too used to D cannons, Falcons, the little extra firepower, and I got a little too accustomed to the Yvraine brick. I think that Yvraine brick in a list like this completely changes all of it. I don't care if you're going to shoot it with bolter fire or anything like that, or flamers. We're going to get our invulnerable. We're going to get our 5+ Feel No Pain. We're going to resurrect our models afterwards. But having something that our opponent could not charge effectively could have swung everything. So I think that's the biggest takeaway from this game is if I'm going to play Monoquins again, I will most likely play Monoquins, but with Yvraine and the Vizarch, just to make sure that we stay hyper competitive where we need to. But thank you again. I hope you enjoyed. I know we didn't walk away the victor in this game, but it was a really great opportunity to see exactly what true mono Harlequins are capable of. I know there's a few things we could have done differently, but part of this game is about learning from your losses. And I really do believe that if you can find success with something like a list in this variety, you will be so much more successful down the line when you move into a few more powerful armies. So please like, share, subscribe. I'll put a link for the Discord in the description below, and I look forward to hearing your comments. Thanks again.